We have so many important things going on this morning. We're running a little late, so I will try and get you out before your stomachs start rumbling. I'm surprised to see somebody else get the high school students here this morning because they had prom last night. They've already told me they're probably going to fall asleep. So I was out late last night because Caitlin graduated, so I'll try and stay awake. You try and stay awake, okay? When I was in high school, I had a friend who, I had a conversation with, a close friend, and he wasn't a Christian. And we had been friends for several years at this point, so I was kind of pushing this friend. Because we were nearing graduation, and I was like, you know what, Scott, I really hope you realize how important faith is to me and how much I would love for you to kind of see that as well. And you could say, I am what you would call like smack dab in the middle of the millennial generation, okay? It's always hard to put a hard start date and end date on generations, but generally, research says that millennial generation started around 1980, 1982, kids that were born about then, and it goes for about 20 years to 2000, 2002. That range, people that were born in there are in the millennial generation. And I was born in 1990. So I was like smack dab in the middle of this new shift that was going on in culture. And so me and my friend, Scott, we were both, millennial poster child. And so I'm having this conversation with Scott about faith and church and why it's important to me and why it matters. And he basically said what the millennial attitude is about religion in America. Because he said, Brendin, you know what? I know that faith is important to you. I get it, and I have no problem with that. Like, that's totally fine, I have no problem that you like Jesus. But, and he said, it's unreasonable for you to think that everyone would have a relationship with Jesus. It's unreasonable for you to think that everyone would be a Christian, or that would work for everybody, right? Essentially, he was saying, it works for you, and that's great. I have no problem with that, but it doesn't work for me. So don't try and force it on me, right? You do you, I'll do me, and we can still be friends, right? Let's just coexist. And that's kind of the millennial attitude when it comes to religion, and specifically Christianity in America. And the research is showing this, okay? But before 1980, the religious lines were very clear-cut. You are either a Christian or you're not. You're in or you're out. You follow Jesus or you don't. Whatever religious line there is, it was very clean-cut, pretty much. And then we lovely millennials come onto the scene, and we're like, let's blur those lines because I don't like being defined. And the research shows this, that, and this is all coming out of kind of Barna's research, but they say that in recent history with these millennials, the category of nuns has skyrocketed. And that is not celibate Catholic women. That is people who do not identify with any sort of religious tag that you can put on it. Millennials say, you know what, I'm not atheist, I'm not agnostic, I'm not Christian, I'm not Muslim, I'm none. I'm just a spiritualist, or don't even label me as that. Millennials don't like being categorized. We're so picky. We're like, no, don't put your labels on me, right? We're like, I'm nothing. We see this in the research. We see that, you know what, as millennials grow up, this is having some scary implications for church in America. Because now Barna is finding that kids that grow up in church, millennials that grow up in church, like me, 2/3 of us graduate from high school and we never go back to church. 2/3 between the ages of 18 and 26 walk out of church. Most of them never return. Some of them do when they get married or when they have kids. They're like, okay, well, I'll come back and send them to BBS. Almost 2/3 of kids that grow up Christian, not kids that are outside the church. That is so much higher than what it was in previous generations. And guess what? This is starting to affect American culture as a whole now. It's not just a millennial problem. Because guess what? Us millennials, the older ones of us, we're in our 30s now. And we are now the adults in American culture, and we are starting to influence the American scene. And so now Barna has found that this is not just a millennial thing. Before, a few years ago, if you were considered a regular church attender, that means you were showing up to church maybe 2 or 3 times a month, which is good. I mean, that would be a regular church attender, right? You hit at least 2 or 3 weeks out of that month, you're at church. Now, people consider themselves regular church attenders if they show up once a month. 1 week out of every 4, if you show up at church, Americans say, yeah, I'm a regular church attender. You're welcome. That's my generation's fingerprints on American culture, saying, let's blur these lines. Who says I need to sit in a pew to follow Jesus? And you start getting all these books that are coming out, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and they have titles like They Like Jesus But Not the Church, or Unchristian, where millennials come in and we think we have all the answers, and so we're like, we don't like your church. I like Jesus. So you know what? I'm going to ditch church and just do Jesus on my own. I'm going to follow Jesus, whatever that means, but I'm not going to be a part of church. I'm not going to be at a local congregation. I'm not going to be in relationship with other believers. And when we say church in this series, we're starting a new series that John mentioned. When we say church, we don't just mean this time on Sunday mornings, although that's a big piece of it. But we're talking about church in a broader sense, in the way that Jesus talked about it, the body of Christ, the relationships that we have, right? It's not just about this Sunday morning. We're not saying that this is the only time that you need to be a part of church. No, church is all-encompassing, okay? And so when we're talking about church, we mean it in this broader context of my relationship with you and us as the body on a mission, okay? It doesn't necessarily mean being in Bulldog Hall, right? But church in American culture has gone down in value, hasn't it? Because of kids like Scott, kids like me that have grown up and said, I don't really like that whole church thing. And it's starting to become this question that millennials have already answered. Because the question is, why does church matter? Why does church matter anymore? Most of millennials say it doesn't. And so, see ya. Why does church matter? Why are you here this morning? Because there's a lot of answers to that question. And guess what? There's a lot of selfish answers to that question, right? And just because maybe you like the worship style, or you like the preaching, or because the Lamberts are here, that's not necessarily a bad reason to come, but guess what? Those are weak reasons because the Lamberts move, right? And then all of a sudden you lose your reason to be at church. And so this series, we're going to try and drill down into the heart of why does church matter? Because American culture is starting to say it does not matter on any level. It is a waste of your time. And guess what? It's actually kind of painful because those Christians, they're judgmental, they're hypocritical, and I don't like being around them. And so, ugh. See, American culture has tried to divorce Jesus from church. They said, we can have faith without church. And I don't think they've heard a logical reason why that doesn't work yet, and so they just keep doing it. They just keep thinking, well, I can be a Jesus follower without being at church. And that's just wrong. Americans are trying to live out faith without church. And guess what? That's not a pretty picture. So let's look at a picture this morning. What does faith look like without church? What do you think? What does faith look like without church? What does following Christ without relationships with the body look like? Well, we have a pretty clear picture. God gives us a clear picture of this, and it's in the book of Judges. I'm going to be in Judges chapter 17. Now, if you are familiar with the book of Judges, you know this is an ugly text. This is arguably the ugliest text in all of Scripture. And so I want to kind of brace ourselves for this morning, because this is not going to be pretty. Now, the book of Judges comes after Moses, after Joshua, but before Saul. Before Israel had kings. And actually in the book of Judges, it says over and over this tagline of, in those days, Israel had no king. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. This is the tagline through Judges, and it's throughout chapters 17 through 21. You probably know some famous judges, right? Samson, Deborah, Gideon, Ehud, right? None of those people are in this story this morning. This section out of Judges has no judges in it. It is a picture looking at what Israel was like during this time. Okay. And we're not going to read all 5 chapters this morning. I'm just going to read 6 verses. And then we're going to fly through the rest of it, because God is giving us a picture of what does faith look like when you separate faith from being the body. Okay, so let's read this. Judges chapter 17, I'm going to start in verse 1. And we're introduced to a man named Micah. And this is what it says. Now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me. I took it." Then his mother said, "The Lord bless you, my son." When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she said, "I solemnly consecrate the silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver. I will give it back to you." So, after he turned the silver to his mother, she took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to a silversmith, who used them to make the idol. And it was put in Micah's house. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods, and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. Now, if you were an ancient Israelite or a Jewish person, you would be nauseous at this point. Did you catch how much was wrong in those 5 short verses? Did you catch it? Let's go back and look at it. First off, Micah, who's this guy? Okay, he's an okay guy. He steals 1,100 shekels from his mom. Man, who robs his mom? Right? Okay, so now, he's a pretty bad guy. But it's like, okay, 1,100 shekels, that doesn't sound like a ton. It's like $1,100, okay. No, back in that day, let's put this in context, a decent Israelite's salary was 10 pieces of silver a year. So he steals 1,100 pieces of silver from his mom. This is her 401k retirement account. This is her nest egg, and obviously she's a rich woman anyways if she has 1,100 pieces of silver lying around for her son to take. But this is not some small thing about taking a 20 out of your mom's purse after church. No, this is millions of dollars that he steals from his mom. And you say, but Brendin, he returned it. He's a good kid. Well, why did he return it? He comes up and says, "Hey mom, I heard you utter a curse about that dude that stole your silver. That's actually me, so please don't curse me." Right? He's not returning it out of love or out of guilt. He's like, "Oh shoot, I don't want God to be angry with me, so here mom, take it." What's her reaction? That's just the beginning. That is so wrong. What is her reaction? Obviously, the godly thing to do would be discipline. To be upset, frustrated that your son would even think this is okay to do. What does she do? "Oh, bless you, my son." Of course this kid is so messed up because his mom doesn't know how to parent. His mom rewards theft. And then she turns around and lies, right? Did you catch that? "I give my silver back to the Lord." And then she gives the silversmith 200 pieces of silver. Hold on. I'm like Matt. I'm not that good at math, but I'm pretty sure she lost 900 pieces of silver somewhere in that transaction. So she is rewarding her son and lying to God in front of her son. No wonder this family is a mess. She gives the silver back to the silversmith. what does she have him do? Make an idol, because that'll make God happy. And then Micah's like, oh, God will be so happy with me. I'll take this idol and put it in my house. And I'll worship it in my house. So wrong. First off, right, God hates idols. Hopefully you know that. Second, you don't worship in your house at this time. You worship in the temple. But he puts an idol in his living room, and he goes one step further. He says, I'm going to make my son my priest. Oh. If you're not familiar with it, let me clue you in. There was an entire tribe of Israel dedicated to being priests. And guess what? No one else could be a priest. This tribe was called Levites. Levites were the men of God who were supposed to take care of the temple and do sacrifices for the nation and worship God. And Micah goes, well, I'm not a Levite, but I'm going to install my son as my priest so that I can worship in my house with my idol. Holy cow, that is so many things going wrong there. And if you were thinking as the writer here, Israelites reading this, of course, at the end of this horrendous picture, you're going to put this tagline. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. That's why this is happening. This is taking place. This terrible stuff. I went through and counted. I think they broke 6 of the 10 commandments in those 5 verses. Without even really leaving the house. Right. And that tagline, Israel had no king, it's talking about a historical time period, right? It's before David, before Saul. But it's also talking about that in this day, Israel forgot who their king was. Right? God is no longer calling the shots in Israel. They have forgotten their holy decree as a nation to be a holy nation. To be the nation that is following God. To be the nation that is a blessing to the world. They have forgotten to what? Be the church. They have decided, you know what? I'm going to follow God the way that I think it fits. The way that I think it works. And so that generates into Micah having idols in his living room with his son as his priest. Because when you divorce faith from church, you get off track real quick. Real quick. Now I'm going to fly through the rest of these chapters. I want you to go through and read it. If you've never read 17 through 21, they are there as a capstone to Judges to give you a picture of what this question is getting at. Why are you at church? Why does church matter? Well, just read Judges. I don't want my life to look like this. But right after this, a Levite comes walking by Micah's house, and Micah says, hey, you're a Levite. You should be my priest. Now, first off, the Levites weren't for hire. This man of God should have put Micah in his place and said, no, you are so wrong. And by the way, let me destroy that idol and set you straight. The Levite says, hey, that sounds pretty sweet, right? So he lives with Micah, gets paid a salary to help Micah worship this idol. Oh, man. So then you're like, okay, well, maybe these are just a couple bad eggs, right? Well, no. Then along comes a tribe of Dan, an entire tribe. They come along and they see Micah's household gods and his Levite. And they're like, hey, that's a pretty sweet God you got there. Levite, why don't you steal Micah's God, come with us, and then you can be our tribe's priest. How much more money would you make that way? And Levite says, I'm trading up. And he does it, and he goes with Dan. And then Dan goes off, an entire tribe corrupted. And they go off and they slaughter an innocent town on the side of the road. Because guess what? The Dan tribe has forgotten what God has called them to do. They lost their inheritance in the promised land. And so now they are roaming around trying to find a new place to live. And so they slaughter innocent people, kill all the women, all the children, burn down the towns, and then build them up again so that they can have a new place to live. Because they are so off track, they have forgotten who they are, and they are doing as they see fit. And then it gets uglier, and uglier, and uglier. Until all of a sudden, because of different things, and I'm not going to go into this morning, Israel is in a civil war by chapter 19. Israel is in a civil war by chapter 19 and 20. And Israel is fighting against Benjamin, one of the smallest tribes. And all of Israel is camped up against Benjamin. Israel has 400,000 fighting men. Benjamin has 26,000. Not a fair fight. They ask God at this point, Israel, who do you want us to send first to attack? God says, Judah, the biggest tribe. So Judah goes to attack Benjamin, and Benjamin kills 22,000 Judah men that one day. So then Israel comes back to God and they're like, God, did you forget about yesterday? Because you told us to go attack, but then I think you forgot to protect us. Should we attack again? And God says, yes, go attack again. This is the only time that God speaks in these 5 chapters. And so they go and attack again. And guess what? Benjamin kills another 18,000. And so Israel comes to God a third day. And then, God, do you want us to attack again? And God says, yes, go attack again. And Israel goes and attacks, and they slaughter Benjamin. And they don't just kill the men. They kill all the women and all the children, and they burn all this. And this is Israelites killing Israelites. It gives this brutal picture that, you know what, God is so frustrated with Israel that he's just having them kill each other. Wipe each other out. And it ends, the whole book ends with, in those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. The scary part about this is that, you know what, I think America is saying the same thing today. We are saying we have no king. We have a president. But God is no longer king of America, if he ever was in the first place. That's debatable. But we definitely don't have God as king of our culture, as God as king of our nation today, right? And so we have people walking around there becoming adults and having kids, and they're saying, I'm going to do whatever I see fit. What's true for you is true for you. What's true for me is true for me. Don't try and force it on me. I'm going to do it like I want to. And we're becoming a Christian nation that is separating Jesus from the church. The crazy thing about this is that, you know what? That's a pretty gruesome picture if you look at it through the relationship between Jesus and the church. What is Jesus for the church? He is the head of the church. So essentially, you are decapitating the church when you say, I don't like the church, but I'm going to follow Jesus. You were saying, I don't want to put Jesus as the head of my life. I don't want to be a part of the body. I want to follow Jesus on my terms. And so I don't want him to be the ruler of my life. I want him to be my buddy. And I'm pretty sure Jesus doesn't like being on equal footing with us. Because that's when sin and destruction and selfishness gets into the picture. He says, look, if you want to be healthy, I've got to be the head. I'm going to be in charge of your life. Well, the American culture is starting to say, we like Jesus as a buddy. Just don't look at Jesus too closely. We want to separate Jesus from the church. And it's like we are divorcing Christ from his bride. The language that God uses between the church and faith and Christ is a marriage. And we come along and we say, you know what? We don't like the whole marriage thing. I don't like the bride. I just like Christ. And so let's divorce Christ from the bride. I don't want to be a part of the bride. But Christ says, look, if you want intimacy with me, you've got to be my bride. I don't have intimacy with anyone else. I have intimacy with my bride alone. So if you're not a part of my body, if you're not a part of my bride, then guess what? You're not a part of me. But today, we like to forget that. We like to assume, well, I can put Jesus in my own little box. And I can follow him as I see fit. And it's going to work out all right for me. If you read through chapter 17 through 21, the whole time, Israel thinks they're doing what God wants. They think they're making God happy. Because they are so off base, they have gotten so off track, that they can't even realize who God is anymore or what he wants. We're trying to do the same thing today. We don't value church in the way that Christ values church, values being the body, values being in relationship with each other. And so this series, we're gonna answer this question: why does church still matter? Why does church matter for you? I want you to answer that question. Why are you here? And maybe there's some selfish reasons, which is okay. Like, I like the people here. I have friends here. I like the worship style. Like that. That's all okay stuff. But if that's the only reason you're here, then we're in trouble. Why does church still matter? One reason is because that is the only way that I can be intimate with Christ, is if I'm a part of the church. I find Christ here in ways that I don't find him other places. I learn what God wants here so much clearer and more accurately than if I was just going to study it on my own. Because I get off track quickly because I'm stupid. I need you to help me stay on track. Church doesn't work without Christ. Christ doesn't work without church. When I was in high school, I had an old BMW, which I've mentioned in previous sermons. The only reason I bought that BMW was because I had some men in my life who knew BMWs and knew cars well, and they were going to help me work on it. And so as I bought this BMW, the first thing that one of my friends, this man, told me was, we should replace the timing belt. That's just kind of what I do every time I get a new used BMW, so let's just replace the timing belt. I was like, okay, great. I was on a high school income, so I was like, great, timing belt's like $30, I can afford that. But then he's like, well, you're actually going to have to buy some coolant, you're going to have to buy a new radiator, and you're going to have to buy, probably we'll get you a new fan clutch and a new water pump and a rotor. And I was like, whoa, what? I thought we were replacing my timing belt. And he's like, well, we are, but you can't just replace the timing belt. You got to take out, you got to drain the coolant. You got to take out the radiator. You got to take off the fan and the fan clutch and then the water pump and then the rotor's right there anyway, so we can just replace that too. You can't just do the timing belt. The timing belt involves all of it. And I was like, are you kidding me? This just became like a $300 project. And he was like, well, if you want to do it right, you got to do it that way. I think we try to do that with faith. Say, I just want the good part. I just want the easy time with Jesus. Because he makes me feel good. And I like the love that he has. And Jesus says, well, you can't just do that. Because that is connected to all of this other stuff of church and being the body and being in relationship with other people in the kingdom of heaven and learning how to love your neighbors as well as love me. But kids my age just want to get to the heart of it. They're like, I don't want to deal with all that other messy junk. I just want to replace the timing belt. I just want to spend time with Christ. I just want to follow Christ. I won't be a part of the church. Well, it doesn't work that way. You can't do it that way. It's one with the other. It's a marriage. It's a head and a body. You can't have one without the other. I think sometimes we fall into the temptation of just thinking this is just tradition. This is just something you get up and maybe your parents drag you to, or you did it as a kid, so you do it now. No, this is where intimacy with Christ begins. It doesn't begin or happen anywhere else outside of the body. Outside of my relationship with you, as we both are in relationship with the Father. And so as we start this series off, I want you to think about, what are the reasons why you come to church? Why are you here? And wrestle with, why does church still matter? Because our culture says